Hey, Loop Tech family, welcome to our very first Sunday chapel. This is what a typical Sunday looks like in the Van Epps hold. I've got my little guy, Brooks, here.
Yeah.
We're so thankful that you tuned in. Obviously, faith has been a huge part of the BAME family and a lot of the history of Loop Tech, but it's also something that we look at within our community and well-being model. When we look at the community piece or the purpose piece, well-being models across the world have really taken into account the spiritual and kind of soul factors of a person's well-being. And so we wanted to create a space for that. Just these these are almost like our safety life talks, but for the soul. And so when we create space for that, we hope you find it valuable and engaging. And since this is our first time, we're not really sure where it's going to go entirely. So we want your feedback on, hey, should we have discussion groups? Do you want to stick around afterwards on the call? So make sure you send that feedback back to us. But more than that, just thanks for tuning in. Hope you all are having a good weekend and a great Sunday. And hope you find this message inspiring and motivating. Thanks, Loop Tech.
Hey everybody, this is Vince Miller. Thank you so much for joining me today. Now, over the next 4 weeks, we're going to look at a little bit of a mini series that I think you're going to enjoy. We're actually going to look at the topic of oil, something I know that you work with every day, throughout the book called the Bible. And we're going to just look at 4 short stories that I think are very inspirational and very challenging. So I want you to stay with me all 4 weeks. I'll probably be about 15 minutes in length each of these times, so they'll be short, sweet, and to the point. But my goal is to leave you with a challenge or maybe something to do out of each one of these lessons that's going to impact you personally, maybe your family, or even at work. Today, we're going to look at the topic of provision, oil as provision. Now, I know that probably at some point in life, we're all going to encounter a moment of need. We all will. I've encountered a few of these moments in my own life, and I have learned that sometimes these moments stem from a sudden event that is not of our doing, right? Usually like a crisis, which is not something of our making. But other times they're going to actually stem from a decision we made. It could be a result of maybe a casual misstep, or a hidden character fault, or even an outright intentional choice we made where we failed to consider the resultant issues that would arise. But regardless of how we got to this place of need, we are there, we have a need, right? And it's staring us right in the eyes, and something has to be done about it. And sometimes these needs are so great, they come with this overwhelming sense of fear, shame, and despair and confusion. Well, often we don't know what to do or how to move forward. And this is precisely what I want to address today. How to find provision when we're in a season of real need. Now, today we're going to look at a short biblical story in the Old Testament, by the way. It's actually in the book of 2 Kings. The story's pretty short, so stay with me. It involves a prophet named Elisha, an unnamed woman with a couple of young boys, and a jar of oil. Here's how the text reads in 2 Kings. It says this: a man from the group of prophets had a wife. This man died, and his wife cried out to Elisha, "My husband was like a servant to you. Now he's dead. You know he honored the Lord, but he owed money to a man. Now that man is coming to take my 2 boys and to make them his slaves." Elisha answered, "How can I help you? Tell me, what do you have in your house?" And the woman said, "I don't have anything in the house except a jar of olive oil." Then Elisha said, "Go and borrow bowls from all your neighbors. They must be empty. Borrow plenty of bowls. Then go to your house and close the doors. Only you and your sons will be in the house. Then pour the oil into all the bowls. Fill them, and put them in a separate place." So the woman left Elisha, went into her house and shut the doors. and she and her sons were in the house. Her sons brought the bowls to her, and she poured oil. She filled many, many bowls. Finally, she said to her son, "Bring me another bowl." But all the bowls were full. One of the sons said to her, "There aren't any more bowls." Then the oil in the jar was finished. When she told the man what had happened, Elisha said to her, "Go, sell the oil and pay your debt. You and your sons can live on the money that is left." And it's a pretty cool story, isn't it? So, what can we learn? In our time of need, what can we learn here about finding true provision? True provision. Two things. First, true provision is found by asking godly people for help. By asking for help. That's it. I know this appears to be a simple point of the text, but this is a hard step for some of us to take, isn't it? We just can't bring ourselves sometimes to ask for help when we have a need. And we don't ask for help for a number of reasons. First, maybe we don't ask because we're ashamed of the situation we're in. Because honestly, we don't like being in the bind that we're in at the present, do we? We're overcome by this feeling of shame and find it challenging to confess the need that we have to others, because it means we have to confess the mistake or mistakes that got us there in the first place. Second, we might not ask because we feel afraid. Simple fear keeps us from asking sometimes, doesn't it? So if by some means possible, we can actually push through the shame of the first feeling, next we have to contest with the fears of just asking someone. Because you see, sometimes we fear that if we ask for help, the person on the other side is going to actually say no, which would only add insult to the injuries we're already feeling. Third, sometimes, honestly, if it isn't shame or fear, we're just too proud. We're too proud to ask. Our sense of pride compels us to figure it out on our own and just muscle up and do something about the present situation by our own strength. Those big three, shame, fear, and pride, present a real dilemma for us when it comes to turning to ask others for help. But in this story right here, this woman does something that many wouldn't do. She asks. She turns to a godly man to ask for help. She pushes through the shame and the fear and the pride and puts herself aside and her needs out there, doesn't she? Maybe simply because she has nowhere else to turn. And we need to note she's presented with a pretty bad dilemma that is not of her own making, is it? I really think of it as a five stack of despair. First, she recently lost her husband. Second, she's now without a husband to provide financially. Third, this loser of a husband left her in debt. Men, pay attention right there. Left her in debt. Fourth, she has only young boys who must not be old enough to provide. And fifth, she's in danger of having her family torn apart and sold into slavery because she has no way to pay the lender. This ain't a good situation. The only possible response is to seek help, and she does. And note, she's not even sure what she's asking for in this text. Even Elisha is unclear about what she's really asking for, but still, she does the right thing. She asks. That's what she does. You know, asking for help is such a simple thing to do, but let's face it, it's hard to do. Usually, feelings of shame and fear and pride cause us to feel alone, and yet these feelings are prone to keep us isolated from two important things: the people and the resources we need. And in our effort to protect ourselves from exposing the feelings that we have to others, we end up preventing ourselves from discovering the limitless provision of God. And God's provision is only found by asking other godly people for guidance and help. Here's number 2. True provision is found by taking irrational steps of faith. By taking irrational steps of faith in our life. So the woman does ask for help, right? She does the first thing right. She's done step one. And Elisha provides her some steps. But let's be honest, the steps are kind of interesting, aren't they? He doesn't give her a bag of money or provide her with some quick solution. He's far more creative in the situation. He tells her to do some actually pretty unusual things. Here's what he tells her to do. Go to all your neighbors, ask for empty jars, shut the door to your house, and then start pouring oil till it stops. You have to admit this solution is a bit odd. It's especially strange if you don't know where all these disparate actions are going to lead. Don't forget, she has no idea where all this is going. He's not dangling a bag of cash in front of her, telling her if she does all this, that cash will come. Yet, oddly, she does it, and she does it exactly as she was told. She's doing some very odd things that have no apparent connection to her present state of loneliness or despair or debt or potential slavery. Let's be honest, it ain't logical. It's not logical at all. Do you know what the logical or the rational next steps would be for this woman? Maybe go beg the lender to forgive the debt, or put your sons to work in the field and ask for new terms from your lender, or pick your family up and run for your life. Those would be logical and rational next steps. And you know what would not be? Go get a bunch of bowls and jars from your neighbors and lock yourself in your house. It doesn't make any sense at all, does it? But get this. Sometimes when our need is so great, we discover that human ingenuity and human effort will no longer suffice. In these moments, we're forced to take a different step, aren't we? One we haven't tried. A step of faith, trusting God for natural provision by supernatural means. You know, sometimes I think God put us in these situations where we're forced to take natural and logical steps off the table so he can move us towards supernatural means and results. I think sometimes he does that. And as we take these irrational steps, and I'll admit, they're going to look a little irrational and sound a little silly and irrational to people around us, but there is a good part. And the good part is this. The steps are irrational, so you can expect the provision to also be irrational because it's derived by supernatural means. You know, if you want supernatural and irrational results in your life, then maybe you should pursue irrational and supernatural means. Makes logical sense, doesn't it? It's just not always the logical way that we go about things. I am certain that this woman felt a little bit silly, turning to her neighbors and explaining why she needed the empty jars and bowls. I'm sure she felt a little silly stacking these pots into the nooks and crannies of every corner of her home. And on that day, she shut the door. I am sure she felt a little silly as she closed and locked the door behind her. I'm sure she felt silly and irrational until that moment she started pouring. And she poured, and she poured, and she poured. And I bet while she was pouring, her kids are like running around the home frantically, moving jars around. And I think she saw, maybe for the first time, that God provides when we ask and take those small steps of faith. I bet her eyes were lit up with laughter and tears all at the same time because she saw it. God's irrational provision. You know, I think there are people watching this today who are looking for just that, irrational provision. And here is what is required first, an irrational step of faith. You have to do that first. So this week, I want you to practice both of these things. First, I want you to ask another godly person for help, even with something small. It could be advice on how to handle a marital issue. It could be direction on a repetitive sin problem in your life. It could be tactics on a parenting challenge. It could be counsel on a peer issue that you're having at work right now. Just find a godly person and then ask them how to handle it. Because I believe if you can learn how to ask for help when you have small needs, you'll be able to do it when you have greater issues that arise. And then second, I want you to combine the godly counsel you get with a measurable but irrational step of faith. This could be as simple as apologizing for a mistake you made with your spouse, or confessing a repetitive sin to another confidant, or asking a group of friends to pray for you. But don't sit back and do nothing and cycle in isolation and in feelings of shame, fear, and pride. Sometimes only God can help, and He wants to. He has supernatural provisions waiting for you. You just have to ask and take a step of faith. Jesus said this in the book of Matthew to His followers. It's a great text. It's where we're going to end today. But Jesus said this. Listen, continue to ask and God will give to you. Continue to search and you will find. Continue to knock and the door will be open for you. Yes, whoever continues to ask will receive. Whoever continues to look will find. And whoever continues to knock will have the door opened for them.